Okay, everyone, welcome back. Now, let's talk a bit more about our widget in this class. And I explained some concepts to you that, might go a little bit deeper in our knowledge, but help us in the long run. And the next class, we'll start to create our widget in our ArcViz scene. Okay, so pay attention in this one, and we'll go at a steady pace too. Let's talk about a really important concept, which is the panels within the widget creator. Now you can see in our widget designer screen here, this is the space what's going to be shown. And I have the canvas panel here, and that's the main panel, the space for our screen. Okay. Now, by the way, we can adapt this depending on the device that we want to create our experience for. So if you go to screen size, there are a few different options here. For example, you can change the size that fits a Samsung Galaxy S4. And it shows you the resolution for it. We have a landscape position, and we can also change it to a portrait orientation. So if I'm creating something to be used on the smartphone, okay? So you have these options under screen size, which are really cool. And there are different options here for tablets, laptops, monitors, TVs, etc. So what I always use is I go to the screen size and choose 21.5 to 24 inches. This one here. This has changed a little. In Unreal 4, you could choose this based on resolution. And it was easier like that, I think. But here you can just look it up. You can mouse over it and it'll tell you the resolution as well. You see that 1920 to 1080 or 16:9, which is the full HD resolution. And this is the one that I use by default to create these ArcViz scenes. So this is our screen. We scaled it with the resolution. We're all good so far, right? Now we'll talk about those panel concepts that I mentioned earlier. Here we have the main panel, which I can't even remove. It's there. It's permanent, okay? Because this is the screen. There's nothing more to it than that. So if we go to the panel, we can see some more options. So what would they be? Well, I'll show you now. I have the main panel here, but I can also add another canvas. Do you see this in the hierarchy? It moved. Okay. So why might that be useful? Well, let's suppose that you want to create many different panels on your screen, okay, that will work separately to each other. For example, maybe I have one canvas here, another canvas there. What's this one for? Well, maybe it's used for organizing things in your interface. For example, I have this panel and I want to add a button to the panel. So it's here. It won't go anywhere. Actually, yeah, you can put it under here and it stays within the panel. Okay, so that's basically what it's for. It almost like organizes the layout or groups the elements together according to the hierarchy. You see that? So we can move them, move the item in the top of the hierarchy, and it moves everything else. Okay, so that's a really good feature to be aware of, and it just helps us in our layout and organizing things, so they're not just randomly placed on the screen. Okay, so we have several different types of panels, but the most commonly used ones, the ones I just showed you, you can open them and analyze them all though, just to become familiar with them. You've got the horizontal box here, and you've also got the vertical box. Let's bring them in. Okay, and you've got the grid panel. There are others that you can check out later, of course, but these different types of panels are just ways to organize things on your screen, horizontally, vertically, you like a grid, etc. I'll add something into the vertical box. Maybe this border one, okay, and you can see that it's organizing the hierarchy and placed the item at the top here. It's lined it right at the top like a border, right? And we'll get to know this later on, but here you can see you can control the alignment. You can fill up the area, set it to fill, and it will resize as well up for the whole vertical box. But we can set it to the right. We can also set it to the left. I'll leave it here at fill for now. And I want to add another one. And it's just down here. Just resize it. just so we can see this a bit better. And so I'll resize this to fill. There we go. And I'll set this first one to fill 2. Right. Cool. So they're both set to fill. It's reorganizes them both within the vertical box, right? So one at the top and one at the bottom vertically. Let me add another one. And I'll also add this one to fill as well. Make sure you click on it and then add it to fill. And there we go. So it's resized 3 borders within the vertical box. You can change the color. And I'll also let's just use a random color. This one here. Okay, there we go. So for example, here we've got this pink color. I can reorganize it here. I can just use the arrows to move it and reposition it. I'll just put that color in so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing, okay? So it just organizes things within the panel, these arrows. It's really cool, isn't it? So in case it's vertical, it's gonna, in the case of being vertical, it'll pile them up. Let's have a look at the horizontal box. We'll just move them all over here. And I guess you already worked this out, right? So it will reposition them horizontally. If I add this to the grid panel now, let's just put the borders in here under the hierarchy. So it's created 3 here. Now it's changed a little bit, hasn't it? So things look quite small, but you can still organize them. So you can organize them horizontally and you can also organize them vertically. So I can create a grid, as you can see here. We can organize this in the layout, and we'll see this later on in the course. So basically, the panels that are used most commonly for organizing the layout are these. Cool. So for example, each element has some really unique functions, doesn't it? And there are many in here. Now, if you open them, you'll see that there are a lot of options to choose from. You can become familiar with them too. Now, there's even ones for creating a list, typing space, special effects, and you got the basic ones, the common ones, which are these at the top, okay, under common, such as borders. They're basically the simple shapes and buttons. You've also got a checkbox, images, name slot, which you can use to type, progress bars, sliders, simple text. Good stuff there. So every time you add an element here, it's an element. Like for example, here this is a type element, so it's a button. But once I've added it here, you can see over this side there's this slot position, right, which is where you can adjust the size of it. So you get a bigger button, and there's more options down below here. So when the button appears, it looks normal. When there's no interaction, you can change its appearance for when someone hovers over it with a mouse, for example. It's just so it highlights so the person knows that they're hovering over that button. Or when it's pressed, you can change when it's pressed or clicked. You can change its appearance as well, so the user knows that they've submitted or clicked on that button. So they're really cool features. Now, we'll talk about that later on as well, but that's how you can affect those buttons. For example, let's look at this one. So this is an image one. You can see here, it's a little more simple, isn't it? There's no option to mouse over. Oh, actually there is. But let's focus on this part down here. Just here. So we have the option to change the image or just add a color, opacity, alignment, etc. So for each element, there'll be different options within the details panel. Now, the last concept in the class is the one that's probably most important, which is the anchor. Okay, let me show you that. This option here. So this is the anchor. Okay, so what is that? What happens? Well, this is our user interface, right? Let me show you it so you can see it in game. So this is the user interface. If I reduce it, you can see how things adapt to the size of the screen. Okay. So they move accordingly. It adapts to the resolution. Okay, even if we go wider than 1920 to 1080. But here's our game behind. That's basically what it is. So we set our screen size to 1920 1080, but if I adjust it within those parameters, you can see that the text and the graphics on screen adjusts accordingly. Okay, it doesn't get all jumbled up. Why is that? Well, that's because we've told it the resolution that we want it to be using, but we've also anchored the items that we put on our canvas. Okay, so it prevents them from getting all jumbled up because they're behaving according to the constraints of the anchor. Okay, they're not going off here, there, and everywhere, which wouldn't be great, would it? So let's suppose someone changes the screen they're looking at. You can still guarantee that they'll get the correct resolution and correct layout. Okay, so that's a good thing to know and bear in mind. You often see these things when users go from mobile to a monitor or a computer. But let's have a look at an example. So here we've got our anchor. What do we need to tell this image to do? When I place this on the canvas, it's positioned relative to the anchor, isn't it? For instance, my anchor's on the upper left side. So if the X position is 200 from the anchor, so 200 to the right of the anchor, if I go to minus 200, it's from the anchor to the left, right? So here, if I set the X position to 200, okay, it's from the anchor down. Otherwise, it'll be upwards. So here you can get the position too. It goes from left to right and right to left. And here you have the alignment. What's that for? Well, it's the alignment in relation to my anchor. Okay, almost like your pivot point in Unreal. So if I set it to 0.5 there, it's aligning to the center of the anchor, but it's but adjusting this position. Okay. Now it might sound like a complex concept at first, but over time you'll understand it and become more familiar with it. An anchor is similar to the pivot point, is what I would say, but it's basically resizing the position of the item on the screen and repositioning it, but it keeps it in place. So no matter no matter how the screen is moved about, it stays in its relative position. And we can adapt this anchor to wherever we want. We can have it in the upper left corner. We can put it in the center. We can change the anchor position to all areas of the screen as listed there. For example, here in the y-axis, we can set it to 200. I'll add it here as well. From the left corner, the center, this one is at the center of the screen. If I use position 0 and 0, usually when you use it, it's shown like this. The alignment is normally shown in the middle. Okay, and what happens? Well, its alignments place the upper left corner of this image at the center. If you want it in the middle, you can just adjust it. Okay, so these values will go from 0 to 1. If I use 1 by 1, it's the opposite. If I use 0.5 and 1, it aligns it at X, and Y is aligned to the base. And if I use 0, it does the opposite. If you want to centralize something, use 0.5 by 0.5, right? And this is really important for us when we're creating the interface. Really, really important. Because we almost have to think about the anchor, where things are positioned and what they're aligned to. Okay, so go over that again if you feel you need to, but that we'll come back to that throughout the course as well. And here, as we can see in our example, which we'll keep referring to, you can see how things are anchored, okay? Such as the background screen is locked in position. And even if we move it, you know, it's still locked. So no matter where I place it, it's going to be positioned in its proper place. It stops it from popping out of the screen as well, doesn't it? And no matter what the pixel size is, it will be in that position. Cool. So that's the anchor. If I lock it on the left hand side as well, you'll see here. See when you pull it from the left hand side, it's locked to the left hand side, the border that is. Okay, so that's the anchor point on our canvas and how that works. Let's suppose I create another panel here. Let's create another canvas panel. I'll place it just here. And this canvas is locked here. The anchor is on the upper left corner. And I'll add this image. So the image is centered. The image, yeah, there we go. We've centered the anchor. But it's centered to its own canvas. So these positions are now to the canvas. So if I move this canvas, it will always be centered in relation to it. So this anchor concept, as you work on it, it will become more familiar to you how it works, and what gives you what is taking ownership of control of the different elements. Okay, great. Now in the next class, we'll start to create the widgets for our ArcViz scene. Hopefully what we've shown you here will put you in good stead, give you a good understanding to move forward. We'll also create the crosshair, which I added, but we didn't go through that, did we, in previous classes? So we'll create the crosshair. We'll create this menu that I showed you, and we'll create it step by step, gradually seeing the process that you need to go through to come to this, okay? And we'll do it so that you can improve your skills and also use the skills you learned from blueprints, because they'll be really important in executing this menu. This gives us the ability to create a menu specifically for the project we want to create. Now, you of course can use different designs if you want. Maybe it'll be a completely different design to the one we're showing you here. You know, it could be a modern one, it could be a vintage one. It's up to you, isn't it, really? However, you do need the concepts and to be able to understand how to adapt them. So we'll work on an exercise on how to create them specifically for this, with these different interactions, sounds, and everything else. We'll create the workflow, the blueprints, the ability to execute the different options, and all the behind the scenes programming as well, in order just to make the animations work and also to execute them, and the loading screen. We'll also put a navigation tool in there as well. So all of these different elements that contribute to the user interface we'll go through in such a way that you can adapt them to whatever project you're working on. For these two classes at the beginning, we just had a more specific overview, didn't we? Now we'll go into our ArcViz scene and start creating everything. See you soon.